What up, what up, what up? Welcome into a new format here on Green with Envy. We are calling it Green with Envy Quick Hits. We'll see if that sticks. I think it will, but we'll see. Today's topic, we are talking about a report from Gary Washburn about the Boston Celtics have shown interest in free agent guard Austin Rivers. Joining me today, we get the three-man weave, Adam Taylor and Greg Manakis. Adam, let's start with you. You're the man in the middle on my screen right now. So let's go right to you here. Gary Washburn says the Celtics have shown interest in free agent guard Austin Rivers. Austin briefly was a member of the Boston Celtics in a three-team trade years and years ago. Of course, we know his history with his father, Doc Rivers, as the head coach of the Boston Celtics back in the day, part of the last Celtics championship. Adam, what are your thoughts on Austin Rivers in green?
I mean, if he's willing to accept a deep bench role and be more of a kind of plug and play guy when you need him, break glass in case of emergencies, we need a veteran ball handler, then I'm fine with this. Adding some extra depth that doesn't require consistent playing minutes makes perfect sense, right? You've got the open roster spot. You've lost Marcus Smart. Yes, you're bringing in a guard where there was already a guard logjam. But the problem last season was that you had four guys that all deserved starting roles or all deserved big minutes off the bench. That really wouldn't be the case with Rivers. He's far removed from his prime, hasn't really been super productive in his last couple of stops. Bringing him in as an end of bench guy, kind of filling that Peyton Pritchard role from last season, seems like you're adding the right amount of depth. Now, the only concern I have is, should you really be using that roster spot for another wing, or do you feel confident that Jordan Walsh has filled that? That's a question for a different day. I wouldn't be totally against this on a vet minimum 1 year deal.
First thing that pops off into my head is Austin Rivers has a podcast, right? Austin Rivers has a podcast called Off Guard. Do we really want a player-centric podcast on the Celtics getting into our market?
Too much competition. Too much competition. Send them away.
Is there too much? Like, is there not really adding much competition to the backcourt, but adding a little too much competition to the podcast market? First thing that kind of comes to my mind. But I think, Adam, your point about how he's not coming in to play minutes, he's coming in to play a role, I think is a huge difference maker between fourth guard Peyton Pritchard, fourth guard Austin Rivers, right? You're not asking him to come in and be a contributor. You're asking him to come in and be a positive veteran presence in the locker room. You're asking him to come in and play his role and show other guys on the team that you can make a living playing a role on a squad, right? You can come in, except like Blake Griffin last year, except without the cachet that Blake brought to the roster, right? So Austin Rivers, maybe you bring back Blake Griffin again. Who knows? But with Austin Rivers coming into the fold, if that happens, I like it for the team because it's going to be a vet minimum. I think filling out the end of the bench with vet minimum contracts is pretty much all the Celtics can do at this point anyway. So you could do a lot worse than Austin Rivers. And I've always liked his game and his tenacity on the defensive end. If you have a couple weeks where Derek White misses time and Peyton Pritchard gets elevated, Malcolm Brogdon gets elevated, then you have a guy who can come in and can be serviceable for 2 to 3 weeks.
So I like the Blake comp, and I think that would have to be where you're angling this towards. Now, the one caveat to this is in that Gary Washburn article, there's a quote that Austin Rivers is looking for more than a mentor role. So that alone would kind of scare me off from this. I think it's a cool story, right? Other than him coming into our lane with the podcast, like you talked about, which I think single-handedly by that comment, Greg, you persuaded me to not want Austin Rivers to take up any more of our market share because it's so fucking crowded as is. We don't really need that. We don't need that smoke quite yet. Maybe at a later date. But it is actually kind of a cool story, right? Because it would give us a chance to kind of reminisce on our favorite time as Celtics fans, the Doc Rivers era, the original big three. And during that period, that was when Austin Rivers was becoming one of the top 10 prospects in the country before he went to Duke. And I know I've heard in certain smaller capacity stories of him playing, in the gym. He's going to go with Doc to the practice facility and be hooping with Paul Pierce and hooping with Rajon Rondo. And so I do think in that sense, we'd get a lot of those really cool behind the scenes stories, especially from, 16, 17, 18-year-old Austin Rivers vantage point, which I think is going to be a whole new perspective from some of the stories that we've heard. But I think going all the way back to this on-court role, I think if he was willing to kind of take that, I'm here to play when I play, but I'm here to do, the stuff behind the scenes that maybe isn't going to get glorified as much, I'd be into it. But if he's looking for more than a mentor role, I don't really want at this point. I'd rather see what we have with Peyton Pritchard than I would having Austin Rivers there if he's not going to be happy. If he's going to be cool with that backup mentor role, and then, hey, if it doesn't work with Pritchard, I know I'm on deck and I'm going to get some extra playing time, like how Blake Griffin knew, hey, if I'm not playing, I'm straight up not playing. But if I'm playing, I'm starting and I'm going to give it my all. I'm with that. But I don't know from what I read that it sounds like that's what Austin's looking for.
You see, I see a mentor role more as like the Vince Carter end of career type of thing, right? Where you're on young rebuilding teams and you're one of the vets. That to me, like, I read that as like, I don't want to end up with the Orlando Magic. I don't want to end up in Oklahoma or Houston or a rebuilding team.
So a mentor role without a chance to be in championship contention.
Yeah, because you don't need to be a mentor on a team that's fighting for a championship. You need to be a veteran role player. I see those two as quite different. So for me, it's like, hey, you come to Boston, you're not a mentor. Who are you mentoring? These guys have been more successful in their careers than you. Who the hell? You know what I mean? It's more of a, hey, you're a veteran. You know how to play the game. You understand. You don't the ups and downs. You don't get too high. You don't get too low. We can bring you in when we need you and trust you to be consistent, rather than be, hey, we need you on the bench because when Cole Anthony goes 1 of 11. We need you to put your arm around him and be like, don't worry, these nights happen. Do you get what I'm like? That's how I see the mentorship role. The one thing I will say is this: the Celtics at the moment have one open roster spot, right? They've got 14 guys under contract. You've got Champagnie, which is, I think Champagnie's non-guaranteed. Let me just double check. Yep, Champagnie's non-guaranteed. Delano Banton's partially guaranteed. And I'm pretty sure Luke Cornett isn't fully guaranteed at the moment either. So you can create some additional roster space. The question you've got to ask yourself is, do you want to fill that final roster spot with another guard, or do you feel like there's something else missing? Maybe you want another big, maybe you just really want to bring Blake Griffin back, or maybe you're like, hey, we need another wing in case Walsh doesn't really pop the way he did in Summer League.
I'm not opposed to bringing Blake back just for the vibes. I was really digging Blake's vibes. Blake had the mustache going. He was all in on being one of the Bus One boys. I'm not entirely opposed to that idea, although I don't know on court there's quite as much of an advantage to bringing Blake Griffin back as there is to finding another use of that spot.
No, and I think with, if you're bringing in Austin Rivers as the fourth guard on the team, the other competition that he has right now on the roster, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it would be Banton, right? Banton is probably the fourth guard at this point, although he has the size of a wing. Banton functions more as a guard in the NBA. So if you're thinking about wing depth, what the Celtics have, they have Jason Tatum, they have Jaylen Brown, they have O'Shea Brissett. Right. And then Brogdon can size up a little bit, and Banton, maybe Jordan Walsh, maybe because he's a rookie. By the way, Jordan Walsh, Andre Iguodala, seeing a lot of similarities there. That's my big overreaction from Summer League, is I love what I'm seeing out of Jordan Walsh and his measurables, especially on the defensive end. Well, I called it. I called Scotty Barnes year 2 Giannis after one preseason game. So I'm calling Jordan Walsh less athletic Andre Iguodala.
Early to the party
on Jordan Walsh being like Iggy. Getting Iggy with it. So that's kind of what I see with, if you're filling out that last roster spot, are you filling it out with another guard, calling Banton your fourth guard? And if Banton's your fourth guard, you probably need something that's a little bit more sure than what Banton can bring. Because we saw in Toronto, he couldn't even stay in the rotation in Toronto. So he's going to have a hard time staying in the rotation in Boston, or back into the rotation, because he won't be in the rotation this year.
Yeah, and it's only going to cost you $200K to end that contract, right? His partial guarantee is $200,000. It's quite easy to move on from that to bring in somebody like Austin Rivers, who makes more sense in terms of, just a veteran presence. Do you feel like you need another big, though? There's a lot of questions there, but if the news broke that the Celtics were adding Austin Rivers, I'm not mad at it. But I would expect to see Banton released.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's either or, right?
Yeah.
You don't need Banton and Rivers. So if you're going to get Rivers, it's in place of Banton, or you're going to keep Banton, then I think that makes, it wouldn't make as much sense to go and get Austin Rivers. Before we sign off here, I do have a quick trivia question for you guys. So I mentioned before, Austin Rivers, technically at one point a member of the Boston Celtics, part of a 2015 trade, which saw Jeff Green go to the Grizzlies, 3-team trade involving the Pelicans. Can you name the other player that came back to the Boston Celtics in this trade?
Well, I can, but I'm reading the article.
All right, see, that's cheating, dude. I'm sitting here.
All right, well,
thinking to
Adam,
myself,
if you haven't read the article yet, who else came back to the Celtics in that trade?
You see, I wish I did now because I was too busy looking up contract money so we could be informative on the episode. I don't have a clue, dude. I do not have a clue. Bear with me 1 second. I do not have a clue. No.
Okay.
I'm
give
going to
it
say
to you here.
JJ Redick. I don't know.
That would have been an interesting pull, but Celtic legend Tayshaun Prince came back from the Memphis Grizzlies in that trade. That's one of my favorite. This is the segment I tried to get going at one point during the season that just got crapped on, where it was players in uniforms that don't make sense. Tayshaun Prince, very high in that list for the handful of games that he played with the Boston Celtics. But that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy Quick Hits. Appreciate y'all following along here. Make sure you are following, subscribing here on YouTube. Make sure you're following us on the podcast as well. And we will be back soon with another episode. Peace, y'all.